My name is Patricia. I'm 27 years old, and even now, I don't really know where to begin this story. I've tried recording this more than once, and every time I stopped halfway through because saying it out loud makes everything feel real again. But maybe that's why I need to tell it. Maybe putting it into words is the only way to understand what actually happened to me, and how it changed who I am. I'm not someone who usually shares personal things. I've always been the kind of person who keeps pain quiet, who smiles through difficult moments and tells everyone I'm fine even when I'm not. But the truth is, before everything happened, I was already tired. Tired of disappointment, tired of relationships that promised forever but ended in silence. I'd had my heart broken more times than I like to admit. Not the kind of heartbreak that fades after a few weeks, but the kind that slowly chips away at your confidence. The kind that makes you wonder what's wrong with you, why people leave, why love feels so temporary. The last relationship hurt the most. He disappeared without explanation, only to return months later with a new life already planned, as if I had never existed in it at all. After that, I told myself I needed a break from everything. From dating, from expectations, from hoping. I convinced myself that being alone was safer than being hurt again. And then my mother died. She passed away 8 months ago after a long battle with cancer. Nothing prepares you for that moment, not the hospital visits, not the quiet conversations, not even the knowing that it's coming. When it finally happened, the world didn't stop the way I thought it would. People kept talking, cars kept passing outside, and somehow life continued while ours felt like it had ended. My father changed after that. He had always been strong, steady, the person everyone leaned on. But grief stripped something away from him. He became quieter, slower, like a man learning how to exist in a world that no longer made sense. I moved back home shortly after the funeral. At first, it felt natural. He needed help, and I needed somewhere to feel safe. We fell into a routine without really talking about it. Cooking dinner together, watching television in silence, sitting in the same room without saying much at all. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence shared between two people who understood loss without needing to explain it. But grief does strange things to people. The house felt different without my mother. Empty in a way that furniture couldn't fill. The laughter, the warmth, even the small everyday noises were gone. Nights were the hardest. Sometimes I could hear my father awake long after midnight, moving around quietly, unable to sleep. And I realized that for the first time in my life, he didn't know how to carry the weight alone. So I tried to be strong for both of us. We talked more than we ever had before. About memories, about childhood stories, about my mother and the life they built together. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we cried. And somewhere in those long conversations, I realized how deeply grief can connect people. Not in a romantic way, but in a way that blurs emotional boundaries when you're both searching for comfort at the same time. There were moments when I felt confused by my own emotions. Not because something inappropriate happened, but because loss makes you cling to familiarity. When someone you love disappears, you hold tighter to the people who remain. You seek reassurance, stability, proof that you're not alone in the world. I didn't understand it at the time. I only knew that I didn't want either of us to feel abandoned again. Months passed like that. Slowly, life began to return in small ways. My father started cooking again. He shaved more often. Sometimes I'd catch him smiling at old memories instead of breaking down because of them. And I realized that healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens quietly, in ordinary moments. But healing also brings reflection. I began to understand that what we were experiencing wasn't love in the way I had feared or misunderstood during my lowest moments. It was grief looking for comfort. Two people trying to survive the same loss in the only way they knew how. And that realization was both relieving and painful. Because it meant we had to learn how to stand on our own again. One evening, we finally talked about it openly. About how easy it is to become emotionally dependent when you're hurting, how grief can make boundaries feel unclear. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was honest. And honesty, I learned, is sometimes the first real step toward healing. I eventually moved back into my own apartment. Not because I didn't care, but because we both needed space to rebuild our lives as individuals again. Our relationship didn't break. It changed. It became healthier, stronger, built on understanding rather than shared sadness. I still miss my mother every day. That never goes away. But I also learned something important through all of this, that loneliness can make you mistake comfort for something else, and that healing sometimes means stepping back even when it's hard. I'm telling this story now because I know I'm not the only person who has felt lost after grief. Sometimes we make emotional mistakes. Sometimes we don't understand our own feelings. But that doesn't make us broken. It makes us human. And maybe the real lesson is this: love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means learning how to let each other heal.